And we're so lucky today to have the chair of the commissioner board there in Chaffee County, Greg Felt, join us today. Greg not only is county commissioner, but he helped co-lead the ballot initiative to get Envision Chaffee County funded, which is a program that we're going to be talking about today. And near and dear to so many of our hearts in Routt County, he's also an avid fly fisherman and a great outdoorsman, and is quite involved in water. So Greg can hear us, correct, Greg?
I'm here.
Okay, so let's all give a warm round of applause for Greg.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you great.
Okay, super. Well, thanks for having me, and I'm excited to be here. I'm excited about the conversation that's going on in Routt County. This slideshow and talk I'm going to run through is derived from one I gave about 8 months ago or so at the National Association of Counties meeting in Washington, D.C. And they had asked me to do one on building county wildfire resilience. And I said, how about we talk about building community through wildfire resilience? So this is a little shout out to Commissioner Redmond, who I understand is there, and some other electeds from the municipality. In this day and age of conflict and controversy, I think when we can find something that our whole community, or nearly, let's say, our whole community can rally around, maybe that isn't prone to a lot of conspiracy theories and just really divergent opinions, you got to grab onto that. And it just so happens that I think our experience has been wildfire resilience kind of fits that. It does not carry a lot of political baggage. It's something that you can use both to advance the interests of your community and long-term resilience, but also strengthen your community around a shared goal. So I just want to start with that as a something to think about in the big picture, because we've seen a lot flow from this in addition to making progress in the forest. Let's go to the next slide, Nathan. So just for context, probably most folks know Chaffee County. You can see the red county on the map there. But we are about 20,000 people, so a little smaller than you, and about half your size or so, 1,000 square miles, and we're 80% public land. So it's a very geographically coherent county in that it basically every drop of water that falls in this county lands in the Arkansas River watershed. And that is helpful in terms of, that's how ranger districts tend to be designed as well with the Forest Service. And so we are kind of all working on the same problem countywide. It's the same drainage, same forest, and same challenges there. Back in 2016, when I ran for office the first time, growth was becoming a big issue here in the county. We were really seeing some change going on. And in addition to that, we were seeing just some major forest health issues. Those spruce beetles were coming up out of the Southwest. We'd had, just like you, decades, if not centuries, of full suppression of fires. We were experiencing a long-term drought. And then with increasing recreational impacts as well, and development in the wildland-urban interface, there was really a lot of concern about our forest health. And at that time, that summer of 2016, I said, listen, it's now or never if we're going to have kind of a community conversation about conservation. And that ended up being a little bit of a prescient statement, I guess, because sure enough, next slide, Nathan, shortly after the election, through work I'd been doing with the Trust for Public Land, we kind of stumbled into an opportunity to maybe get some funding for some community engagement in our community to talk about kind of look at our community's future through the lens of water, is how it was originally framed up for us. In the end, this opportunity kind of imploded on itself a bit. There were some disputes between a foundation and Trust for Public Land, but in the end, the foundation really liked our proposal and ended up sending us money independent of the whole program that they had tried to put together. And so we were able to take that and embark on a pretty amazing community engagement process, which has led to a lot of great things. So Envision Chaffee County was sort of designed by a core group of about 8 real engaged citizens who were involved in different aspects of that kind of community conversation. And we built out a program that basically would run the school year of 2017 to 2018. And we brought in some great facilitation. We did a lot of promotion, big open house, and really made it clear that this would be open to the entire community. And by the time we were done, if you count the people who participated by surveys and that sort of thing, we had over 1,500 residents out of 20,000 weigh in on this whole discussion. And our goal was in the fall was to have these big group meetings and try to peel back the layers of different people's sort of subjectivity and maybe divisiveness, and try and really skin things down to some core values that we felt really were what our community was about and what we wanted to be able to say our community was about going forward. So we spent 3 or 4 months just doing that. And it was some painful, I'll admit, it was some painful, what do they call that? Composition by committee at times, but we were able to do it. We came up with 4 vision statements. And probably the one that's most applicable to this conversation was, it's really simple. Our forests, waters, and wildlife are healthy and in balance with outdoor recreation. Let's go to the next slide. From there, I'll give you an idea of what the other ones were, just so you know. Our community members are able to live locally and benefit from a resilient economy. Our community remains friendly, engaged, and culturally connected. And we have sustainable agriculture, beautiful rural landscapes, and development focused in and around towns. So, I mean, these are pretty, kind of vanilla, I guess, in a way, but they really do speak to the core values of the community. And man, if we could make all those things happen, we'd be hitting on all 8 cylinders. So as we went into the winter of 2018, we transitioned from creating these great vision statements to focusing on how do we actualize those? How do we make those come true? How can we say this is true of our community in the future? And so we worked through a whole bunch more facilitated conversation and developed what we called the action plan. And there were about 40 different projects that kind of rose to the top. Some of them were easy, some of them were hard, but they all had a lot of merit and value to them. And so those were the ones that we kind of all agreed, let's put them into this publication that we're producing, and let's commit to those. So very collaborative process, and some examples would be things like, let's create a community foundation. I know you guys have one up there. We didn't have one yet of those yet. Let's work on a management plan that is sort of all lands, multi-jurisdictional for recreation management. Let's do better with sustainability and recycling. Let's get a website put together where all community resources are in one place. Let's look at maybe doing termed agricultural conservation easements rather than perpetuity, because honestly, none of us knew what perpetuity really meant. And we have agricultural producers who are willing to make commitments during their lifetime, but maybe not for the future of their family. And so we had all these cool ideas and people ready to work on them and things, but with some of these real landscape scale challenges, and I think among those that really rose to the top would be managing outdoor recreation better, managing forest health and wildfire mitigation better, and then supporting our agricultural economy and trying to protect our working lands. Those types of big picture landscape scale challenges really require funding. Next slide, Nathan. And so as we wrapped up the Envision Chaffee County sort of process, community engagement process in May of 2018, we said, man, we really could use some significant funding. We had no idea how powerful and important this idea would be. It just seemed like it was going to be hard to move forward without it. And so we got together with our board of commissioners, the 3 of us, and talked about this. All 3 commissioners had participated quite actively in Envision Chaffee County. And we worked with Trust for Public Lands, who has a nationwide conservation finance program They will work with any community that's trying to advance this cause. And with some support from the Gates Family Foundation, we were able to do some statistically relevant polling and really do a great job of asking our community some pointed questions and developing language in a fairly scientific, I guess you could say, way, or legitimate way that we felt the community would support. And so the commissioners put this ballot measure on the ballot for 2018. It was a 0.25% sales tax. It excluded some of the usual items. I can't remember exactly. I know farm equipment was one. And what we did is we created 3 funding buckets. So we're going to put, let's see, I think it's 25% of the money would go towards forest health and wildfire resiliency. 25% would go towards sustainable agriculture. 5% would be dedicated to managing recreation impacts. 5% for admin, and the remaining 40 could flow to any of the buckets. But the goal would be over time to keep that 25-25-5 kind of proportionality. And along with that, in order to get this passed, I think we wisely, and it's certainly played out, we really committed to leveraging our community's investment. So we weren't just going to take their money and spend it, but we were going to build out a great grant program where we could, have a great team of community advisory committee that would analyze the grant applications and create a rubric for scoring them and that sort of thing. And that one of the really important elements would be, hey, you need to bring match to the equation. We want to really leverage this investment by our community. And I will add too that when you have a sales tax, our communities aren't that different. We found that about 40% of the projected revenues were actually going to come from visitors. So that, I think, also helped sell this to our community. So let's go to the next slide, Nathan. So that campaign, if you think about it, in some ways, the ultimate survey is an election, right? And an election cycle or a campaign season is often really that conversation that communities have when they really dig into the issues, and different people with different points of view step forward to champion those points of view. So this campaign season and the campaign for our ballot measure 1A, which we came to call Chaffee Common Ground, really continue that community conversation. And I think a couple of things that happened out of that. One, it really hit home how important our river and our watershed were to our community. It's really the core of our landscape and the core of a lot of people's feelings about who they are and where they live. And the other thing I think that really hit home with the growth that we had going on was that these natural resources, our landscape, is really a capital asset of our economy. And what you don't want to do, and my Republican colleague at the time really made a great case to the business community, that you don't want to expend your capital assets to cover your annual operating costs, right? So we can't love it to death. We won't have that asset, that golden goose anymore, if we don't take care of it. And so with that, we had a great kind of community campaign team, and we were able to pass this. It was one of only a few conservation finance measures that passed that year. It was kind of close with 52% in support, but we got it done. And then we were off and running. Let's go to the next slide, Nathan. When we came out of the Envision Chaffee County community engagement process, one of the sort of action plans or groups that formed around a problem, maybe we should say, was a group that called itself the Fire and Healthy Landscape Partnership originally. And we zeroed in on that as, something that I and Commissioner Keith Baker, and then Cindy Williams, who was my co-lead on Envision Chaffee County, we really felt like, we want to spend a lot of time on this forest health question. And so we brought in a pretty good sized multi-jurisdictional group of stakeholders there, forest, BLM, state forest, our fire protection districts that we have here, and parks and wildlife. we tried to get a broad group and say, hey, we really need to start approaching this from a more integrated and coordinated standpoint. We were finding that the approach that had been taken was kind of fragmented and siloed and not necessarily coordinated across these agencies. We didn't have a way to prioritize what acres of land were most in need of treatment throughout our county. And even the communication among the agencies wasn't really good enough to be able, especially with the timeframes that NEPA involves, they weren't really leveraging off one another's work. And so we weren't really maximizing the value of the work we were doing. Just the last 2 days, I've been at the Arkansas River Basin Water Forum and got to welcome Dan Gibbs, our director of DNR, yesterday for our keynote address. And one of the things he talked about was they don't want to see any more random acts of restoration. And what he meant by that was just, checkerboard, just doing some fire mitigation here, some there, without any kind of overarching plan. And that was exactly the mindset that we had and the problem that we were seeing. And so what we decided, we identified that the Community Wildfire Protection Plan as a statutory instrument was really probably a great place to start. We had one. It was the kind of thing I think that was someone sat down and wrote it, it got approved, and it got put on the shelf back in 2007 or 10 or something like that. So we came together and we said, listen, why don't we build a community wildfire protection plan for this county that will embrace these sort of principles that we're talking about and see if we can't coordinate better and also build a plan that really prioritizes where we ought to be coordinating so that we are getting the best value for our efforts. And so initially, the first thing we had to kind of understand was, what is the health of our forest? How flammable is it? What are the fuel loads? What are the interconnections between that? And then we did a big process of listing the different assets and values at risk. So this was everything from critical water and power infrastructure to wildlife habitat to vulnerable neighborhoods to important recreational assets at source water protection areas, all these things. And we worked with CFRI, Tony Chung's group that I believe is coming to talk to you tomorrow. Wow, what a resource. They helped us turn all these facts and data points into these GIS layers. And we ended up building a map with over 50 layers of talking about, again, these values, these assets at risk, also, different types of forest, different degrees of flammability, so to speak, areas of risk. And we were able to put this all together. And then we took the next step of adding in the cost of treatment, depending on the type of landscape area we were looking at in the county. And when we put all that together, we were able to identify areas where high risk could be addressed with high cost efficiency and kind of maximum community benefit. And so what that led to is the map that you see on the screen. We call it the treatment priority map, or more colloquially, the bang for the buck map. And what we determined with the help of Tony's group and a few other kind of specialized agencies or NGOs that work in this space is that if we treated the correct 5% of the total landscape, it appeared that we could achieve a 50% reduction in the risk of catastrophic wildfire. So the goal of the Forest Health Council, which is we institutionalized that partnership. I already forgot what I called it there. The Fire and Healthy Landscape Partnership. We created this Forest Health Council, and we said, we're going to spend the next 10 years. We're going to try to treat that top 30,000 acres, and this includes public and private lands, by 2030 to reduce that risk in half. And it's going to probably cost us 45 million is what we what we figured. And that sounds really daunting. I think that's why a lot of another reason why a lot of plans end up on the shelf, because you look at that and you think, wow, that's insurmountable. But, you know, to sell people on investing in something that big, I think just like we did with our conservation finance measure, you kind of make the business case. And so when we talked about, hey, 50% reduction in risk for 5% treatment, and making, you know, really leveraging that investment, and then demonstrating how we were going to work across all these jurisdictional lines, that all these agencies were signing off on this, and that furthermore, with the help of the state forest, we were going to really address private lands, because our map showed that about a third, 10,000 of the 30,000 acres were on private lands, and that we were going to work to try to find funding to cover, especially our large landowners. You know, it's one thing for a homeowner to be asked to cover the cost of doing, you know, kind of defensible space around your house. But when you got, say, a rancher who's got 500 acres of pinyon or something, and we need to do treatment there, you can't expect that guy to step up and pay for that. So we realized that we were going to have to fund some of the private land work as well. Let's go to the next slide, Nathan. So we got to work, we got this thing done. The county commissioners, fire protection districts, all the different agencies signed off on it. We had a great ceremony. And then we turned our attention to implementation. And I'm sure folks in the room know that, you know, it's one thing to talk a big game about collaboration. It's another thing to do it entirely. And in addition to that, when you're talking about federal lands, you can't just push go. NEPA can take a long time. Even categorical exclusions can take a while. And so initially, we kind of had to go where there had already been NEPA done, or there already were categorical exclusions in place, at least on the federal land side. And so we looked at those places. We also tried to triangulate off previous work, looked at existing fire breaks that were already in place, like burn scars, like the Decker Fire burn scar from 2019 to the south of Salida, roads, power lines, private lands that were already treated or were ready to be treated. And what we found is, gosh, there's actually a lot we can do right out of the gate here. And so this map, basically that area on the left side of the screen below Methodist Mountain is mostly part of the Decker Fire burn scar, and then also some treatment that was done, I don't know, 15 years ago or so by the BLM. And then up to the right-hand corner, upper right corner, those are some categorical exclusions that the Forest Service had already worked through going up Poncha Pass. And so we got together with the public land agencies and a bunch of private landowners for that yellow strip that goes from near Salida across to Poncha Springs, and really got cracking, because we thought, gosh, you know, if we can connect the burn scar to these categorical exclusions, we're talking about a huge fire break to protect about probably 8,000 people between Salida and Poncha Springs. And what we set our fire protection district and the state forest to work on contacting landowners directly, working with Art Hutchinson here, who's pictured, who was a large ranch owner in that area, and got everybody to sign off on working on this. At the same time, we went to we talked to Parks and Wildlife, and we said, you know, how does this wildfire treatment work maybe with wildlife habitat? Are there synergies we can achieve there? And they said, absolutely. You know, this area, it needs to be thinned. We could have a lot more good pasture if we thinned out some of these, you know, crown to crown pinyons and open things up. And so through that, we were able to get a significant grant from the Restore program, which is run by the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and is really aimed at wildlife habitat improvements. But they love the idea of combining wildfire mitigation with wildlife habitat improvements. And so we've gone on. We just got another one last week. We've achieved 3 of these grants over the last couple of years, and that's been a really big help. Let's see. Yeah, so that's all I need to say about that one. Let's go to the next slide. Getting my notes mixed up here. So let's talk about the private land side of this equation. You know, I think when we talk about private lands, one thing that was really important to our voters was that we weren't going to just, you know, quote, do a bunch of yard work for rich people, right? That we were going to actually do targeted work. We were going to require the landowners to participate and, you know, try to minimize the actual expenditure of public funds on private lands, but use those funds to take a more coordinated approach. And one of the programs that we stood up with the state forest here is something we called Chaffey Chips. And what Chaffey Chips is, we went back to our fuel treatment priority map, the bang for the buck map, and we said, okay, which neighborhoods, which subdivisions, which areas of private land fall into that red, you know, kind of highest priority. And we identified the top 4 there, and we went out to those communities and met with homeowners associations and also met individually with landowners. And we said, look, you guys are in the red, you're in danger, and we want to help you. We are fire protection district. We help them with our funding to purchase some of these trailers, as you see pictured here. We also bought a tub grinder for our landfill. It's about an $800,000 machine, but we found you can actually throw whole appliances into this thing and it spits out, it looks like little flattened aluminum cans, or you throw a big truck tire in and like Warachi sandals come out the other end. Amazing machine. But we use it just for wood, but we tested it on all kinds of stuff. But basically what we've done is we've set up these weekend, it's usually Friday, Saturday, Sunday, scheduled programs with these different neighborhoods or subdivisions, and they have plenty of notice, months of time in advance to do all their limbing and hauling out of slash. They bring it out to the sides of the road, and they work as a community to accomplish this, helping one another. And then we come through, some of it we chip on site, some of it we haul to the tub grinder. And then folks who are bringing a load of junk into the landfill for $20 can leave with a truck or trailer full of mulch as well. So we kind of got it coming and going out there at the landfill. It's been amazing, the kind of community spirit that has erupted out of being chosen as a Chaffee Chips neighborhood. And we've done, I think, 8 or 9 neighborhoods over the last 2 summers. It's been about 400 landowners who have participated, created about 1,000 piles of slash that we've dealt with. And we've got a list of communities here that want to participate. And we're trying to hold to our treatment priority map and say, well, we have to do these ones first. It's also led through these community conversations. We now have 5 neighborhoods or sort of unincorporated communities here in the county that have become Firewise communities. They've gone through the process there to get designated for that. They're building their own plans, and they're continuing to annually work on their wildfire mitigation. It's been a really inspiring thing. And like I was saying at the beginning, it has helped, I think, strengthen the fabric of our community and help neighbors get to know one another and work together. I've heard just so many great anecdotal stories from this. As a way of funding private land work, because, as I mentioned, we do have a number of really large landowners and or folks who may not be able maybe to do the work that we would like them to do, but their land falls into a high priority area or potentially adjoins projects that we're already doing through this multi-jurisdictional approach. We don't want that to hang us up. So we applied for an NRCS RCPP grant last summer, I think it would have been. And through that, there's I want to call it the alternative funding program or something like that. It's something that Michael Bennett actually helped put together several years ago. to make the program kind of more responsive to local needs. And wow, we won a $5.7 million grant. And that NRCS money is really all for treating private land. So we've got a big fund now to be able to go beyond just the Chaffey Chips sort of neighborhood participation program, but also work with our larger landowners and be able to absolutely cover the costs as needed when we're doing large scale leveraged multi-jurisdictional projects across across all kinds of different property lines. Next slide, Nathan. So I can't, and I'm not going to try to adequately describe all of the different projects we have going. We have, as I mentioned, 3 different restore grants going that combine wildlife habitat with forest health projects. We are continuing to meet as a forest health council and working across these jurisdictional lines. And we've also, because of the momentum and the enthusiasm, we've been adding members to that council. So Excel Energy is a big player in our area. They've joined because they've got some major major high voltage lines through our area. They need to clear big fire breaks for those, and we're able to work in conjunction with them. Sangre de Cristo Electric is more of a local rural electrical cooperative. They're doing a massive project to clear their lines on public and private land, and we've been coordinating with them as well. And then, we're here in the Upper Arkansas River Basin, where a lot of water supply begins for municipalities like Pueblo, Colorado Springs, even some that are outside our basin like Aurora. And so we've been pulling those water utilities into the discussion as well. They're very interested in working up to the north of us around Turquoise and Twin Lakes to protect that water infrastructure up there. So jumping back here to Chaffee Common Ground, and this would be my encouragement to you, I think, is that we have seen, we've been able to leverage this money, not just on forest health projects, but across the board, those 3 buckets, and being able to distribute funds to different grant applicants who are bringing match to the table. And then through our own projects that we're specifically focused on here, we've been able to use the fact that our local community has said, tax me, I will pay more in order to help fund these efforts. We're all in. That has had tremendous impact on these large scale funders. I think it's what really turned the tide on that RCPP grant, the 5.7 million. So we've been able to leverage about 5 million that we've collected as of last year to about 22 million in commitments. Some of that is not forest health. Some of that would be for conservation easements and things like that. But we've really been just much more effective at this than I had ever hoped, in basically quadrupling the value of the investment from our community. Let's go to I think the last slide there. So I'll end this here with kind of talking about where we are now. I'm sure you experience this kind of thing or can picture it, but we're in the headwaters region. We're in the Upper Arkansas Basin, and we're, as I mentioned at the beginning, we're a very geographically coherent county. We have the Continental Divide to the west and the South Platte Divide to the east, and a little bit of the Rio Grande Divide to the south. But we're not the top of the drainage. Lake County is up at Leadville, that area, and that's the red county outlined on the map there. And one thing that just couldn't really shake was the fact that we're not an island. No county is. And throughout Envision Chaffee County, we had always said, if we can come up with solutions that don't just fix our problem, but that are transferable and scalable for other communities in Colorado, that too will leverage our efforts. That too will, really move the ball down the field, and it will protect and provide more resiliency for the work that we do. So whether that is protecting agriculture and supporting that, whether it is working on how to better manage impacts of outdoor recreation, or whether it has to do with forest health and wildfire mitigation. If we can get our neighbors working in a similar way and pulling their oar in the same direction, we're gonna leverage our efforts. And so in talking with Lake County, they had many of the same concerns as us. They hadn't had the benefit or the good fortune to go through this community engagement process we did, but we said, hey, why don't we skin this down and we'll come up there and help you go through what you would need to come up with this kind of next generation community wildfire protection plan, like we did with, working with CFRI, building this multi-layer treatment priority map. And let's worry about funding later, because, we know you're a different community. Your voters may approach things differently, but let's at least figure this out, because we all know fire doesn't respect boundaries. Neither does infestation and drought. And so we wanted to even potentially pour some of our money into Lake County, particularly our grant money, not so much maybe our local sales tax money, but to make sure that these multi-jurisdictional projects didn't just end at our county line. And so Lake County's been really open to that. They've pretty much wrapped up their community wildfire protection plan process. And so what we did to try to manage this whole thing better is we contracted with the National Forest Foundation, which is a congressionally authorized nonprofit that works with the National Forest to kind of advance funding and projects, and to sort of, it seems like, kind of help get around some of the bureaucracy and some of the challenges of just the local district ranger level, let's say, being pretty burdened with their workload as it is, and providing a platform where they can manage funds, they can help coordinate treatments across jurisdictions and across counties. And so we created with Lake County the Upper Ark Forest Fund. National Forest Foundation is administering that for us. They're helping coordinate. Like, for example, we're applying for some of that co-swap funding money that's coming out of DNR. And as an RMRI landscape, I know some of you in the room will recognize that term, some won't. The Upper Arkansas area was designated an MRI landscape. And so that makes us eligible for co-swap funding from DNR. And so we've been working with National Forest Foundation to try to obtain the million that is potentially available to us, and then administer it separately between the two counties on some different project priorities, but kind of all working towards the same goal. And so that's kind of where things stand right now. And so just to wrap it up here, became really clear to our community, the natural resources are where the source of our quality of life, and also our economy, and the river and watershed health are just critical to that, our boating and fishing here on the Arkansas. And I think that by this process of updating our CWPP in particular, our citizenry and our experts in the community were really able to prioritize the things that they value that are at risk and to severe forest fires. And, we've got a long way to go still, but last time I checked, we had brought in over 19 million out of that 45 for our 10-year goals. We had treated, pushing 2,000 acres and in the first 2 years. And we had about 14,000 acres in the pipeline in terms of going through NEPA approval and all that sort of stuff. So, and then of course, these HOAs and subdivisions really lining up, wanting help treating their property. So coming back to the first thing I said, when I called out Commissioner Redmond and the other electeds there, is that I think we've really used this adversity, right? This threat of wildfire and turned it into an opportunity to make progress towards a safe and healthy future and a stronger community fabric that's really a future that is truly built on common ground. And it's a great story to tell. I love telling it. I don't want to minimize the challenge of it, but what I know of Routt County and that community and your leadership up there, I don't see why you couldn't do the same thing. I truly don't. And so I think that's why Tim reached out to me. That's why I said, yes, heck yeah, let's talk about it. And so that's my story. I'm glad to try to answer questions. I'm pretty fried. It's almost Miller time, but on a Friday, but I'm sure you guys all feel the same. So thank you.
Let's hear it for Brandon. Right, I think we're all a little fried. That was a lot of information in a little bit of time. And you used the word inspired and how you were inspired by some of the work that happened. It is an inspirational story. Very impressive. So thank you for sharing it with us. I'm sure we do have a question or two. Given our time schedule, that's probably what we do have time for. So who's got a question for the commissioner that they'd like to ask? And I will note you will have to use the microphone so he can hear you. Sally.
So I'm sorry I had to step out for a couple minutes, but right before I stepped out, you mentioned that you did the assessment and targeted 5% treatment for the biggest bang for your buck. And then you came to the complication of implementation, and then you kind of built off in an opportunistic way, it sounded like. So I was just curious how, like, achieving that biggest bang for buck model overlays with that kind of opportunistic model, which is what we have to work with often.
I couldn't quite get all of that. I'm really sorry. Could the gist of that get repeated?
Sure. So you had mentioned you did an assessment to target that a certain percentage of treatment could be achieved based on the targeted efforts. And then you said the issue of implementing that work arose. So at some point you have to figure out where to begin that work. And you mentioned building off of existing burn areas, targeting landowners that were willing to partner with you. And so I just wonder where that kind of, it didn't seem disconnected, but how do you anticipate rolling into achieving that biggest bang for your buck while also seizing that opportunity? Like, where does that balance lie?
You bet. Okay, I got it now. So I think I do. What we did once we completed that bang for the buck, that treatment priority map, then we reconvened almost immediately as that Forest Health Council, and we said, okay, what are we going to do now? I mean, what's ready to roll? So each of our, the Forest Service and the BLM in particular, each stepped forward and said, well, here's where we have NEPA approval. Here's where we have categorical exclusions, or here's where we've been working in the past. We cataloged all the former or previous treatment areas, whether those were mechanized treatments or controlled burns, that kind of thing. And it was a very collaborative and, not without its dissent at times, but we just sort of organically had some really long, full day facilitated meetings where we just talked about what was available to us to work on and how did that overlap with that treatment priority map. I think what we saw on the private land side was, in fact, I think if you talk to folks in the state forest, you will find that our district, I guess you'd call it, or our division here was, I don't know, they weren't in super high spirits. They were just kind of plugging along, doing their thing. And when they saw this kind of community enthusiasm and understanding of the threat, it became much easier for them in their outreach, I think, to find people who were interested and willing to advance the cause. And as we came up with that idea of Chaffey Chips, and we chose the initial neighborhoods because they corresponded with areas of red on that map, that we had no real pushback from those neighborhoods. They were excited. and embraced it and got motivated. And so the path forward wasn't clear, but I think as we work through kind of some real deep heart-to-heart conversations, and we understand, I'm sure it's the same up there, you have to overcome some institutional boundaries maybe, or resistance. We do it this way, they do it that way, that kind of thing. And we kind of said, we understand those feelings, but like, it's actually not acceptable to us. We want you guys to work together. And we, in a friendly way, we demanded it, but we also said, and we're with you. We're going to back you all the way. And we're going to be there all the way. And by the way, here's some money, that our community put up for that. So I'm so grateful to our local district rangers, our forest supervisor, our regional BLM folks. They got behind this. They said, man, this is how it ought to be. And so there was good, I think, conversation coming down the chain of command, like, hey, let's make this happen. Let's find ways to do this. I don't know that there's a perfect answer to that question that was asked. It's probably going to be different in every situation, but it wasn't just, okay, plug in the GIS map and it'll tell us what to do. We had to then do an assessment of what was possible in the context of the map, and really, at times vote, honestly, on different directions. Sometimes there were good reasons to go one way and the other, and we just had to come to a decision and go with it.
Thank you again, Commissioner. Because of our time, we're going to move forward, but we, again, want to express to you how much we appreciate you take time out of your Friday afternoon. Later on, we're all going to go get a beer. We're sorry that we can't raise a glass to you in person, but we hope that you are treating yourself to one here directly.
That sounds awesome. Thanks for the invite. Tim's got my email. If anybody has more specific follow-up questions, just reach out. I'm very glad to help you, and I really wish you all the best. Routt County is an awesome place, and we want to see you succeed. Thank you.
Well, you can come up here. Tim says he owes you a beer, so come on up then. Take him up on it, okay? Thanks for